Yeah, that's great.
And when I say that, I'm not throwing you around my heart. Yeah, because it's the this week pretty much.
Thank you.
We have Mr. Hausman.
Did you put it in your old?
Yes, he's
I'm gonna put it in right now.
No, you're good. You're good. Thank you. Welcome, everybody, to our joint City Council and School Committee meeting. This is a meeting that we have the pleasure of having together annually around this time of year. So thank you to my council colleagues for being here, but also the school committee colleagues of ours. Thanks to BevCam for making sure that the public can follow this. I was saying to President Abel, I'm not usually so far from you, Kim. In the chambers, we're much closer. But BevCam is here and they're ready to roll. So I will officially call to order the City Council portion of this meeting. This is the joint City Council School Committee meeting on March 22nd, 2023, 7:30 p.m. Ms. Kent is not with us, so I will call the roll. Bowen. Crowley.
Here.
Feldman.
Here.
Houseman.
Here.
Rands. Here. Rotundo.
Here.
St. Hilaire.
Here.
Sweeney.
Here.
Flowers. I'm here. Thank you.
Sure, and it's my distinct pleasure to also welcome all of our colleagues in city government and our administrators from the district. I will call to order the Committee of the Whole and do a quick roll. Mayor Cahill.
Here.
Ms. Coelho. Here. Dr. Mackenzie DeFranza. Here. Ms. Robinson. Here. Ms. Visnick. Here. Dr. Silva.
Here.
And I'm Ms. Abel. Thank you so much.
Thank you, President Abel. Councillor Rand, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I don't see a flag.
She's got it.
Oh, here. No.
Rescue.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Much louder when we have all of our voices joining in. Thank you all. It's my distinct pleasure to welcome Dr. Chirocek as our first presenter, and I also would encourage you to introduce all of the cabinet members you brought with us.
Awesome, thank you very much. I'm excited to do that. So first of all, thank you for inviting us and having us here to present to you tonight. I'm Dr. Sue Chirocek, I'm the superintendent. This is Dr. Andre Morgan, he is our Director of Opportunity, Access, and Equity. Ms. Megan Sudak is here, she is our Director of City Connects, our Program Manager for City Connects. And I have in the audience Dr. Flaherty, who is our Assistant Superintendent, Jean Sherbert, who is our Finance Director, Bethany Splansky, who is a Director of Pupil Personnel Services, and Erin Brown, who is our Director of Information and Human Resources. Did I get everybody? And I even knew all their names, so that's really good. So you want me to just dive right in? All right, thank you. When we were here last year, we had an opportunity to present to you sort of some of the highlights and some of the accomplishments that we had last year. And so we wanted to do something similar but not redundant. So we kind of changed it up just a little, but we have some information to share with you this evening. First of all, on our agenda tonight, one of the things that we thought we would do, we did an equity audit that we presented to our school committee in March of 2021. We, at the time when we did it, knew that it was a 3 to 5 year document that would be a living and iterative document. We kind of feel like we're in that midpoint, and so we sort of thought perhaps we could combine some of the information that we're sharing with you here tonight with sort of an update on the equity audit 2 years later, highlighting some of the accomplishments that we have achieved based upon the findings and recommendations that we made. We will be connecting that with our district improvement plan, as well as a little bit of an insight as to how we plan to sort of move the work forward. And in that, we will be having Megan share with you some of the work that City Connects has been. We've made a big investment in our district in City Connects as an opportunity for us to provide a multi-tiered system of support for our students, for all students. And so Megan's going to give us an update on what that work has looked like to date. I will share these slides with all of you. I'll have Donna send them out to you tomorrow. Included in the slides here is a link to our full equity report. It's also available online, but should you want to look back and remind yourself what that full equity audit report looked like, it's available to you here. So I'm going to begin first with talking a little bit about our district improvement plan. When we completed our equity audit in March of 21, we had come forward with some findings and some recommendations. And based upon those recommendations, we brought together stakeholders in the community, teachers, administrators, students, through student surveys, through forums, and we put together our district improvement plan, which runs from 2001 to 2004. We're in the second full year of executing our district improvement plan. We have one more year left, and we will be creating some new focus areas for that as we go forward. But the overarching goals for the district for those 3 years were creating conditions that promote equity, rigorous and consistent curriculum, innovative practices, and efficiencies around our operations and management practices. So these are our big goals. These are what drive a lot of the decision making that we have. It's what drives our budgets when we're taking a look at where do we want to put our resources and how do we make decisions about that. And so I always, and those in the school committee are aware, this is probably the first slide in almost every presentation that I do. So they've seen it a lot. But it's important to go back to what are we hoping to do and what are the outcomes that we hope for our district. So in particular, that was those are the 3-year overarching goals. We identified specific focus areas each year. Last year we had 5 focus areas, and I presented at this meeting an update on each of those focus areas. We're going to do something similar this year, but we're going to roll that into looking at and aligning it with the equity audit that we did. Our focus areas for this school year have been fostering a positive school community, so looking to create a school community that respects diverse people and talents, that elevates student voices, that cultivates belonging, and that engages a divergent group of stakeholders. And I have to say that we wrote this goal a year ago. Every day or every meeting or every step forward we take, it becomes more alive to me, and I have a better understanding of what it means. And I think that's happening for all of our team, for all of our cabinet members, for all of our administrators, and we're beginning to really work hard to see that buy-in with the teachers in our classrooms. And of particular value for us has been elevating student voices, and so we have some information to share with you around that. Ensuring a whole child approach to success. This largely is the goal that drives the work of City Connects and the folks that are working in City Connects. It's assessing the strengths and needs of each student through an MTSS, which means multi-tiered system of support. So we take a look at individual students, what are their needs, and what is the level of support that we need to provide them so that they can meet success. That connects each student with a tailored set of school and community-based supports and resources. I'm going to let Megan talk more about that in a little bit. Advanced coursework, this was a continuation. We continue to be committed to make sure that all of our students have opportunities to enroll and succeed in advanced coursework. We know that that is fundamental to success. It's tied through research and in many ways, but students that achieve success in advanced coursework is very highly correlated to success in their outcomes for employment and for future college. Climate action planning. This is an area, and I don't have a lot on this tonight, but maybe we'll have another conversation about that another time. We're very excited about the work we've done about climate action planning. We have created green teams at every building. We have our district operational sustainability committee. It consists of some stakeholders from the community, school committee member, administrators, and teachers. And the work that we're doing there is to really take a look at all of our operations and make sure that what we're doing is moving in the positive direction around emissions and around all of the things that are important to all of us. And then finally, hiring and retention practices. And we really are working hard to develop and implement conventions that not only attract a diverse workforce, but also reduce bias in the hiring process as we go through it and ensures consistent and equitable practices across the district. So these are the focus areas that we determined and that we've been sort of clinging to throughout the year as we have been introducing what we do throughout our school year. If you remember our equity audit, when we did the equity audit, we chose to do an internal equity audit. Dr. Morgan and I had both had experience in conducting equity audits, and so together we identified 10 focus areas that we were going to take a look specifically at data, utilizing the data, talking to students, and gathering as much information as we could, really taking a pulse of where we were in March of 2021 in terms of all of these areas. So we're going to go, I'm not going to read all of these, we're going to go through these individually now, and you'll get to hear what were our findings, what were our recommendations, and then what did we see collectively as a district for accomplishments under each one of those recommendations. So that first area that we looked at was accepting and or marginalizing student identities and voices. What were we doing? Were we accepting student voices? Were we elevating student voices, or were they marginalized? In our finding, 94% of our students believed that it was important to engage in discourse around race, but they noted that the conversations were rare in the middle school and in the high school. This was a really important finding for us, and it really has driven the work that we did. First, by peeling back why is that, and what do we need to do to kind of alleviate some of that for students. We made recommendations at the time 2 years ago that we would utilize World of Difference, the program that we have at the middle school and high school, to help engage students in discourse and around race, and that we would begin facilitating regular community conversations with all students. And so, again, 2 years later, what can we cite as accomplishments for that? Well, one of the things that we did and we began at the beginning of this school year is to create a superintendent student ambassador cabinet. We have 14 students from the high school who participate in this cabinet. We structured it as a leadership workshop for them. So within the course of the workshop, there have been 4 or 5 meetings so far, and we still have one. We introduced these students to some leadership protocols as a way to hear and listen and learn what their perceptions were, how their experiences were at the high school. And I think of all of the things we're going to talk about, this could be my favorite one. The ability to spend time with our high school students and hear from them what was happening in the schools really drove a lot of decisions that we made in a lot of different directions around professional development that we might have thought about, around curriculum resources that we were looking at in the selection process. So it impacted a lot of different things. We've held student forums and classroom discourse. We know that some of you have been a part of some of those. We continue to do that. In particular, at the middle school level, Dr. Morgan has had a series of assemblies with our middle school students talking about difference in general and the different strategies that students need to have to become upstanders and not bystanders. So, and then finally, we have a Project 351. Some of you are familiar with Project 351. The traditional method of that is that in 8th grade, one ambassador is chosen from the 8th grade class. They work, they get some training, and then they work to create a community project, something out in the community that is contributing and giving back. Project 351 had selected 6 districts across Massachusetts to participate in a pilot program. They're looking to how do we elevate and how do we expand so that we're reaching more students. So we were selected, we're lucky to be selected, I think, as one of the 6 districts. 2 of our high school juniors have been selected and have been participating in a series of 5 training programs, and they will be rolling out April 4th and 6th, I think.
Well, actually, April 11th and 13th.
Oh, sorry, April 11th and 13th. A program at the middle school. So our high school juniors, the concept is we empower our juniors with some leadership skills and the ability to take their voices down to the middle school and have that impact some of our students. So that as a pilot program is rolling out coming up. So.
All right, our second area, staff alignment with definitions of equity. Equity alignment is really about aligning the district's activities with its ambitions for advancing equity. It requires reflection and really an honest assessment of our organizational cultural behaviors and our future aspirations in terms of where we want to go. The findings indicated that we weren't aligned in our definitions of equity. And so one recommendation was that equity really had to become a part of our culture. And that is the way that we examine and implemented processes and procedures and our practices in the classroom. To address this area, we now incorporate an intentional equity lens in our professional development offerings. For example, under Dr. Flaherty's leadership, we start the school year with a keynote on equity that gets followed up during the course of that year with faculty meetings. Additionally, our leaders and staff are engaging in state and nationwide diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, including the SEED and RIDES projects. Additionally, our district has been recognized for the work that we're doing thus far, and we've been selected by organizations such as the Massachusetts Association for School Superintendents and the Essex County Learning Community to engage in deeper equity work in our district. And that is the work that moves us beyond awareness into implementation.
A third area was English language arts and math achievement. In short order, our findings said that there were the achievement growth scores in math showed underperformance of all of our subgroups, and the current achievement scores in ELA actually were a strength for us. So the equity audit was good. It gave us some good news and some bad news, some areas of focus. The recommendations were to undertake a cycle of review on our math curriculum actually all the way through, as well as a review of literacy materials specifically around cultural relevance and representation. The accomplishments, I think, that we hold dear. At this point in time, we have disaggregated data meetings through data-specific meetings utilizing the DataWise for Equity, which is a sort of newer version of DataWise. Anyone that's familiar with DataWise, they also have revisited the work they did, the authors, and have put an equity lens throughout that. And those are happening regularly at all of our schools, at all of our levels, which we're very proud of. We implemented a new curriculum in math, Reveal and Alex programs for grades 6 through 12. That follows, if you remember, we had already implemented a new math program, Zern, for K to 5. We're implementing complementary literature with culturally responsive lens, which include authors from different backgrounds at the middle and high school. And we have full implementation of our Wit and Wisdom program, K to 4. And that definitely has a high level of rigor, and it prepares students for some of the work that we're implementing at the middle school.
And so our next area is over/under racial representation in advanced course enrollments. And this was a specific lens at our high school. Our findings in this area showed that students of color were significantly underrepresented in advanced placement courses. And in order to provide the access point, we needed to eliminate the barriers for more challenging courses. In other words, we had to judge students by potential and use honors and AP courses really as opportunities to identify students who could make that educational leap. Our high school administrators and teachers took the time to speak with students individually and also interview them as a way to coach them up and say, hey, you can do this. From the students identified in the spring of 2022, there are 56 students of color who are enrolled in advanced coursework this year, where the median grade for the first quarter was 90.35. This number is up from 35 students in the 21-22 school year. The percentage increase from the last school year to the current is 60%. We're also implementing advanced placement recruiting fairs where students have the ability to recruit students. And so we know that this is a multi-measure tiered process, if you will. If we're going to change the culture and the way that we do things, then we have to do this type of deeper work.
We took a similar look at our English learners, current and former English learners, and found the same gaps existed for enrollment in advanced coursework. And so we have an ELE team, as well as some of the high school faculty members, and the recommendation was that we develop a comprehensive system of communication. So in addition to finding and reaching out individually to students, we are sort of targeted the idea of family engagement for all of our EL families, and some of the barriers that Andre described for our students of color for our English learners also involve a language barrier. And so we have done a couple of things to that, and one of the main things that we have done is increase the language access tools that we utilize in all of our buildings. Those language access tools not only include interpretation services for families, whenever they need them, but in our messaging, we are messaging our messages in translated for families, anyone who requests it, in I think about 7 different languages. And we also have an opportunity and an ability now, within a moment's reach, utilizing the phone to connect families and a teacher with an interpreter so that our communication is fluid and more immediate. We're not waiting 3 days for an interpreter to be available. So the registration process for families, all of these things, Caitlin Belezer and her ELE team have done a tremendous job at accessing and looking at what's available, how can we best make sure we're reaching all of our families and making sure that they have easy access to our schools. Additionally, there's been a dual enrollment program. When we look particularly at advanced coursework, we partnered with North Shore Community College, and there's a dual enrollment program specific to ELs that they take place in conjunction with North Shore Community College. So they're accessing high school credits at the same time that they're accessing post-secondary credit. So that's been a real success.
Our next area was students categorized in economic disadvantage status. At the time of our audit, 28% of our students were classified as economically disadvantaged. It's not a small number. And in this school year, it's going up, and we're now serving 36% of our students who are classified as economically disadvantaged. Now, why does this matter? Income-based disparities in academic achievement emerge early on in life, and they persist in the later childhood and adolescence. And so by adulthood, those from low-income backgrounds, they complete less schooling overall. And because the academic achievement gap between low-income youth and their financially better-off peers often translates into a gap in adult earnings and overall socioeconomic status, limited education really contributes to the transmission of socioeconomic disadvantage in the next generation. So what we're really doing is disrupting a cycle. And that's not hard, that's not easy work. Our recommendation was to increase our multi-tier systems of support. You will hear about one pathway we took in the City Connects presentation that will follow this discussion. We've also increased our guidance supports. We partner with community organizations that provide services for students and families. And we created intentional access points to our enrichment programs.
Another area was over-under representation in school discipline. And we know that national research notes that the differences in the rates at which minoritized and white students are disciplined is a disparity between the two. However, our data in Beverly did not uphold that. Our data in Beverly did not show that there was a significant gap between the two. That doesn't mean that we don't look seriously and want to figure out what we might need to do and what other alternatives. In addition, there's been new legislation that's been passed that asks us all to take a look at how we use discipline and the kinds of discipline. And so at a district level, the recommendations was to take a look at restorative practices, to engage in opportunities for positive alternatives for positive alternatives for school suspension, and also make responding to behavior a priority, to responding to misbehavior priority, and help staff have the tools they need within the classroom to begin to engage in some classroom management strategies that avoid behaviors before they actually happen. We have a strong partnership with the YMCA program. They have a positive alternative to school suspension for students in grades 9 through 12 that incorporates therapeutic services, wraparound services, access to mental health supports. There's a lot of opportunities available for students in that. We are looking and working and actively working this year at the middle school to create a similar program in-house. The Y does not have a program for grades 5 through 8. However, the administration has created a REACH program which has a lot of supports, largely a stronger level of academic supports, so that we're not excluding kids from their core academic subjects, but rather using restorative practices for them when they have misbehavior, and in a way that there's growth and education that's kind of aligned with it. And in addition to that, we have formal data meetings to disaggregate discipline data so that we're keeping an eye on any of the trends that may be occurring or any of the things that are happening. So that's in place.
Our next area is over/under racial representation in special education. The good news in this area is that the Massachusetts Department of Elementary and Secondary Education did not identify the district as having any significant disproportionality by race or ethnicity in specific education identification and placement. This is a dynamic finding, and thanks to Mrs. Splansky and her team and their ongoing efforts, we want to maintain this and ensure that there will not be disproportionality in this area. We're doing this through monitoring our school-based support teams and utilizing DataWise for equity. You heard Dr. Trocheck mention DataWise for equity a little earlier in our discussion. DataWise is not an initiative or a program. It's an improvement process. And it's an 8-step model that guides teams of educators to work collaboratively to improve teaching and learning through evidence-based analysis. The model helps educators to really develop the habits of mind necessary to use collaborative data inquiry to build more equitable schools. This year, DataWise expanded significantly, this year is in this school year, to include a very intentional equity lens. And so each of the 8-step model includes specific benchmarks that speak to equity and that move the needle in that particular area. So it has a very, very explicit lens that we are finding has been very helpful to us in deepening the work that we're doing around opportunity, access, and equity.
And then I think this is the last category, the staffing, diversity, and recruiting. We have some data points here from our 2021 audit. At that time, there were 20 minoritized staff broken down by groups here. And our commitment and our recommendations were to kind of build on partnerships and recruiting fairs to make sure that we were working to do that. We currently have increased our minoritized staff at all levels. We now have 47 staff that are considered minoritized groups. And our recruiting includes increasing the number of job fairs that we have and partnerships that we have with higher ed. We do know that some of the 47 staff that we hired came directly from our expanded use of job fairs and are looking further and wider into the community. We also have really worked to increase our outreach to the Beverly community. I mean, when we think about our hiring practices, if you were to really take a look at the staff across the Beverly schools, a good majority of our staff came and went through the Beverly Public Schools, and they're staying in Beverly and they're working in Beverly. And so if we're being representative, we certainly have students that are going on into higher ed that may be in a minority category. So we've increased our outreach to the Beverly community. We've created parent-to-para program where we are actively pursuing and trying to interest parents of coming in and working with us and providing specific training opportunities for parents as they re-enter the workforce for some of them, and that work is ongoing. And that also had a great impact for us in the ability to just hire staff in all areas. So I'm going to turn it over to Megan. Megan's going to walk you through some of the work. So we made a rather large human resource investment, as well as some of the ESSER funding that we had to go towards setting up a formal and partnering with Boston College for a more formalized opportunity for multi-tiered systems of supports for our students. So I'm going to let Megan take it away from you.
Thank you. So I'm here to talk about City Connects and what we've done so far. Schools in today's society are expected to do a number of supports. And if we go to the next slide, it's going to show you, this is what they call the chaos slide. And these are all the different supports that students need, families need, and I can say that we've definitely encountered all of those. So what City Connects is a framework used in order to kind of make it so it's not as chaotic, we will say that. So our goal is to create a systems approach, right, to services by collecting the data that we need in order to then provide the proper supports for our students. This year is really a building phase of our approach in Beverly, so we're using this year as a baseline for identifying the initial needs and the services needed. So part of that comes with the City Connect's professional development of our coordinators. We have 8 coordinators in the 7 schools. They all took part in an institute in August through Boston College. And then throughout this year, I'm actually going through the professional development with them. There's 15 different sessions, and we go pretty much every other week. We also meet, we have a one-to-one coaching session every week. And we meet as a group for 2 hours every other week, so we can all kind of see where we're at and see the trends that we're seeing across the board. So this just gives you a little overview of that in terms of what we talk about throughout the year. So it's really starting about it, introducing ourselves, but then also how do we build, the support plans for students, how do we reach all of the students, and then also at the same time engaging all of the stakeholders necessary. So this gives a quick overview of some of the activities and the implementation that we put forth in the first 100 days. I felt like that was the easiest way to explain it on this slide. So the beginning of the year, most of the coordinators spent a majority of their time in classrooms, in the cafeteria, at recess, really seeing students in their social setting, but as well as in the classrooms during academic time. And it was really to get themselves visible to students and to families. We sent out surveys to families asking specifics, of services that their child currently is provided or takes part in. So it could be anything from they were doing Beverly Youth Softball, they were doing piano lessons, they were doing dance lessons, or they were enrolled in an arts-based therapy, something like that. We took the opportunity to do an intake from parents as a way to build our database of service providers. And we sent out that survey to parents and got a decent amount of response. I will say, going back to talking about our translation services and all that, I think we put it out in 16 different languages so that we could reach all the different families. And we also put it out online as well as in classrooms during parent-teacher night, that sort of thing, to get as much as we could. So that's how they started. We then went into what's called the whole class review. So the whole class review is essentially an intake of every student. And in Beverly, we are doing grades K through 5, 7th and 10th grades. Those are the big transition years. And it is predominantly well-known, City Connects is well-known and used in the elementary years. So the whole class review basically is the teachers sit down with the coordinator, as well as the coordinators meet with the school nurse, with the paraprofessionals, with the special ed supports, any stakeholder in that child's education. At the older grades, we surveyed the students in the 5th, 7th, and 10th grades and asked their opinions of different things about what academic supports they'd like, do they feel supported in different ways, and what activities would they really like to do. That process started in October and it ran all the way through December. We got through 2,800 students. We then had a whole class review on all of those students, and we talked about 4 specific domains: the academic domains, social emotional behavior, health, and family. And what we did is look for strengths and needs for each one of those domains. The goal was to provide both a strength and a need in all 4 of those domains. And we were able to do that for the most part. After we do the whole class review, or I should say as students are being reviewed, if a student is popped up as having significant needs right away, we immediately go to what's called an independent student review, and we meet and gather all of the stakeholders and provide a plan specific to that student. I just want to make sure. So the tiering process, there's a tier 1, tier 2A, tier 2B, and 3. And that is part of the whole class review. Both the teacher and the coordinator look at all those domains and decide if the student falls into what we call tier 1, which is usually just needs supports that are in enrichment, perhaps a little bit of prevention of needs. Tier 2 falls into, we look for services that are more early intervention. And then for Tier 3 is more crisis, significant intervention for students. Students that are tiered 2B and 3 have a significant risk need in one of those 4 domains, or multiple needs in any of the 4 domains. We then moved into January. We gathered all that information of the students and were able to provide principals just a general overview of all the strengths and needs of their students specific to that building. And as this was happening, the coordinators were doing other things as well, I should say. So they were referring students to different services. They were referring students to a variety of different programs. And since then, we've actually, implemented lunch bunches for students that needed to get some social emotional support. We then went into data meetings. So what I did was I spent about a month diving into the data that the MyConnects program provides us, and was able to break down the strengths and needs for each teacher as well as each grade level for K through 5, and so that the principals and administration could utilize the data and actually have grade level team meetings where we looked at specific things of what they noticed was across. We started noticing, for example, we noticed in first grade and kindergarten, we were seeing significant behaviors, certain behaviors that were popping up of students needing to, play school a little bit better, how to actually, what's going to make them successful. So from that, we actually have an initiative, and I'll talk about that in a little bit, but looking at different trends and just taking a very general look. We don't want to jump to conclusions. We don't want to make, we don't want to make judgments on certain things based on one single individual whole class review. It's a consistent system. Sorry, this actually is an example of what we use when we're talking in data meetings, and it actually goes back to what Dr. Morgan was talking about with the data-wise process. We actually talk about when we're looking at data, when we're showing graphs and all the different types, is stay low on that ladder. Let's not jump to those conclusions and really make a generalized statement about something, because we do know that this is, not a perfect process by any means. It's, perception, it's highly perceptive based on the teacher, the coordinator, and the stakeholders. So that's just an example of what we use and a protocol that we use for the teachers as well as, administrators, sorry. So further analysis, we then dove in, and every building it asked me for different needs or questions about, what areas could I dive into deeper. And so those are things we're now moving forward with in terms of grade level trends, comparisons of individual classrooms, district-wide trends specifically to social emotional behaviors. Overall, as I said, we had 2,800 students reviewed for their strengths and needs. Typically, they say in a typical year, City Connects uses about 10% of the students would fall into the Tier 3 category, and that's their sort of benchmark. We did, I will say, have 19 students that were added after we went through the whole class review process, so they don't have a number when you see the next chart. You're going to notice it says that they weren't reviewed. It's simply because they were added in. And what I will say is that, majority of a major group of our students are in the Tier 1. 44.5% of our students of these 2,800 students fell into the Tier 1 level. We did have 27% were in the Tier 2A. So that could be simply something where a student really, needs a scholars club to work on their math after school. It could be, looking to build up a mentor, is to get a relationship with a mentor. You will see that overall, 27.4% of our students fell into Tiers 2B and 3. Tier 3 was at 10.3%, so we were right around for a typical year, and that was their percentage, I will say, pre-COVID. What we then did was we looked at those Tier 2, we looked at the Tier 3 students immediately. The Tier 2B was our next group of students that we looked at to make sure they had supports, services, and how could we help them and do an individual review. So this is an example, this is just an example of taking all that data in the aggregate and disaggregating it for our principals so they understand. So for example, this is from one of the schools. 74 of their students were identified as having a need in the area of relationship skills. So of those 74 students, we then go in and I break it down so we can look at specific subgroups. So in there, we look at race, ethnicity, we also look at our L population, we look at our special ed population, and then we're also looking at gender as well, just so we can see if there's any trends again. But it gives a little bit more narrowed down data for each principal, and we can look at specific students. We're also able to pull up the students' names specifically based on need, and that's how we've gotten our lunch bunches and certain groups that we've put into place, because we can immediately look up and say what students in our building have a need in relationship skills, what students in our building are tier 2B students and have this need. So that helps us. So this is just an example of that. So the other major piece of City Connect, which I spoke about, is the system referrals. So these are some examples, and we talk about both what is coming from the school-based supports as well as what's coming from the community. So in the green is actually our tier kind of 1 supports for people, and that's the prevention. So just gave some examples of what those would be. In the school district, you're looking at anything from athletics, all city jazz, SEL instruction. In the community, we're looking at different groups or businesses. So Express Yourself is one, the different dance academies. In our early intervention tier, in the school, we've got the different RTI processes, which is response to interventions. Another example is the Scholars Club that happens at many of the elementary schools, as well as our dental clinic, because that's considered an early intervention and can be preventative for many of our students. In the community side of things, you're talking about bootstraps, we're talking about the group Timmy's Angels, and just getting families the coats and the gifts they need at different times of year. And then when we talk about intensive and crisis, so tier 3 level supports, in the school district itself, we're talking about team referrals for special ed statuses. We're also talking about our homeless student support, talking about our L student support, and mental health counseling that's happening. And then on the community-based side, just so you have an idea, we're talking about our DCF, our Children's Family Friends and Services, as well as the YMCA PASS program that they sponsor. Our current programs and initiatives, I will say we've logged over 8,700 services in our students. Of those 2,800 students, 1,300 of those students receive 3 or more services. We have not honed in specific as to how many are district and how many are community, but we at least know that the majority of our students are receiving 3 or more. Current programs and initiatives that we've kind of put into play as well this year, just gave some examples. The elementary school, elementary level, they're doing Hannah Transformative Mornings. It's at Tardy's. It was specifically for some of the students who are having a hard time getting to school. My coordinator there has created an incentive program just to get them in, and the more that they, for how many days they come in that week, they get, a quick break with her, they get to pick something from a bin, that sort of thing. At the middle school, my coordinator along with an art teacher are this semester working on a program called Art with Heart, and it was specifically after school art projects along the lines of helping with female empowerment, and so it's for a group of middle school girls. High school, we're actually piloting some SEL program for our L population in conjunction with Project Adventure. We were able to solicit them, and they had a grant that we could utilize. And then moving forward, some example initiatives for next year, as I said about the first grade, and we noticed some behaviors. We wanted to take a proactive approach. So the coordinators got together and said, what if we did a character building type of curriculum specific to first grade. So my coordinators will go in just once a week to first grades, and district-wide, every student will be receiving the same lessons every day. We were having some of my coordinators, I have a coordinator at Cove, in the fall was doing some coping ninjas groups after school for students who had high anxiety, and social foundations. And it's wonderful and it's been awesome there, but at the same time, we look at it from an equity lens of if my student goes to AIRS, they should be getting something similar as well. So we looked at that approach to say, okay, here's a way we can pilot us doing a district-wide initiative. So we're specifically, we sought out Bev Education Foundation support with what's called Purposeful People, and we've got a few things planned for that group. We've also talked about doing attendance. It's been a big discussion for all the schools, is coming up with some new for next year attendance awareness efforts, everything from a little 10-minute dance party on the 10th to, just getting students to school and, just more positive reinforcement about getting to school on time and how it's going to help them in the long run. And the last one is we're going to take a little bit of a different approach to our sophomores. We're actually in the spring, Carla, who's our coordinator at the high school, is actually going to start in the fourth quarter meeting with the freshman academy teachers of this year's current freshmen to gather a quick tier on those freshmen and then be able to share that tier with the 10th grade teachers next year. So that way we have a transition and we have an idea of what's coming in, and then that way we can move and transition them and help that way. So that is City Connects.
All right, so I have a little bit more to talk about budget, but I thought we'd take a 5-minute opportunity if you have questions and answers about anything that you heard here while it's all still kind of fresh in your minds. So if you guys want to figure out how to run that.
I'll ask President Flowers if any of the city councilors have questions first.
Sure. Any members of the City Council with questions? Councilor Sweeney.
Thank you, Madam President. I have a few budget questions, so I'll hold off on those, but just generally about the program. Thank you for this presentation. It's really great to hear the impact. 2,800 students, that's a significant number of students that have received support from this program. So that's great. Sounds like the results are there. I'm curious, I know that, and we've talked about this in previous years, it sounds like this was an initiative that came out of the pandemic and recognizing the need there. Is it best characterized as something that the school has provided as an additional layer of support above and beyond kind of the framework that had existed prior to the pandemic, or is it really better characterized as restructuring what was an existing support system in the schools and trying to work with existing personnel and just be a little more effective and targeted in outreach to students?
So I kind of think both. And I wouldn't say it's specific to the pandemic. So we had done a lot of work looking into how can we bring a multi-tiered system of support to the social emotional realm, right? We do have a very strong MTSS program for our academics, but we really were lacking that within the SEL. And so we had been searching for what would work. The pandemic came along, exacerbated that for many of our families and many of our students. And we, through one of the associations that we have with ECLC, were introduced to this program. This is a program out of BC, and it was sort of an MTSS that was already formed. So I'll go back to that chaos slide. We were giving a lot of these supports to a lot of students. We didn't have it in any organized or systematic way. And so the City Connects and the MTSS model allowed us to begin to categorize and begin to organize information, because a lot of kids get missed when you're in chaos. And so this allows us, the motto is know every child, right? The idea of this is we don't want to miss some kids because our system of delivery is chaotic. And so this helps us organize it, it helps us have a check-in, it helps us, have a connection and take a look at what is every child and what do they need, and then target some of those supports more streamlined and in a more efficient way to those students who really need it. So I would say it was a kind of a combination of both.
Okay, that's helpful, thank you.
Do any of our school committee members? I'll defer back to President Flowers if you have a question down here.
I do, but I saw Councilor Hausman's hand, and so then we'll go, school committee will get a chance, and we'll come back this way.
Yes, I second the comments by Councilor Sweeney about thanking you for this presentation. It's very informative. I was particularly struck and interested in I'm not going to remember the specific numbers, but the increase in economically disadvantaged students and the percentage that went up from like 24 to 36 or something like that. is just really a startling number, and it may not be in your wheelhouse to explain why that is the case. But if you have any insights as to what might have caused in Beverly that kind of increase, and then how for that, I assume it's that group of people, talk a little bit more about the problem and the responses to students who are homeless and or having, particular mental health issues, because I assume there's some overlap there as well.
Okay. So I can't give a reason for it. I only can cite that that's what the data tells us. There could be a number of factors, but all of the information around economically disadvantaged now is collected through direct certification. So the state actually, I think, has a better handle on families, because anyone that's accessing certain supports become directly certified to us as economically. So the identification process might be easier. I also think, and I'm not sure, so I don't want to quote too much, but there was a change in threshold from 135% to 185%. And so that 185% captures more students who are living in economically depressed sort of households. So I think that would be my biggest significant reason for that. In terms of homelessness, our homeless list, so I don't know that we've seen a huge increase in homelessness. I just do know that, it's been something that we've had to address in Beverly for a while, and I don't have off the top of my head specific numbers. So we do have a homeless liaison, Ellen Faulkner, and she manages and keeps the data for all of our families.
And what kind of services response that are specific to homeless students in a homeless situation do you have?
I might defer. I don't know if you have that disaggregated.
Sure, I don't have it disaggregated. I can tell you, specifically, we've had our coordinators will get involved and help. I've got coordinators who are filling out raft applications for families, helping connect them with bootstraps, helping connect with a variety of things. So, it's there. Unfortunately, I don't have the data specific to it, but it is there. But that's where the coordinators can come in, because they're the ones that are helping connect that family of, I still want my child to be here, and how do we get them? And, we check in on them and meet with the students, and they're usually found in our lunch bunches or our check-in groups or those type of coping ninjas, that type of thing.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. President Aba, I'll go back to you for a school committee question.
I know that we've had a number of opportunities to learn more about that. No questions from the school committee? Oh, Ms. Coelho.
So with the City Connects, I know it was a huge job to go around the first time to scan all the children, see who needed help. Is there any process in place to go back from time to time to rescan the classrooms and the same children, in case there might have been a child that didn't need services before, but then all of a sudden pop up and they could immediately be put into a tier 2 or tier 3 that all of a sudden needs help?
Absolutely, that's a great question, and actually, I just skipped it on my slide. So we actually are starting by the end of this month. The next step is we re-tier the students. So we do a quick check-in with teachers, and it's very specific to, I should say this, throughout the time, if they're seeing things come up with students or students are added, they immediately will contact our coordinator so we can get the services right away. But we do what's called a re-tiering process, and we actually go through, and without the teacher having the original number they gave in front of them, they then give us another quick tier of what they think they should be, and we'll then be able to look and see, has there been improvement, have any of the services helped, and then we'll go back and then we do the exact same process next fall. So they'll be re-tiered again with another set of teachers, another set of eyes. If that makes sense.
I have a question.
I'll go to Counselor Feldman, and then I'll go back to President Abel.
Thank you. Yes, it's actually not even a question, it's more of a comment. I remember the chaos slide from last year, and I really appreciate, as a person that's, first of all, numbers oriented, but also our job is the budget, I really appreciated the follow-up slide that showed really the community supports, the internal supports and the community supports in less chaos, and really tangible. And I also very much noticed an effort on your part in the presentation to give us quantifiable, like the findings that you found in actual facts and numbers, because that's so helpful in measuring our progress. And I think sometimes people get stuck in the words and presenting in a fun way. But if you really want to measure progress, like sometimes we really have to look at the data and the facts. So I really appreciate this presentation in a way that that really answered a lot of our concerns and questions last year, and it was noticed. Thank you.
Got plenty of data.
Dr. Mackenzie DeFranza.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you, Dr. Trochik. You're always so thorough. And to the rest of the team, of course, that presented. I had a curiosity about how we select the students who have maybe a more amplified voice, for example, those who are in the cabinet, and then how do we engage those who actually perhaps have voice but express it in a way that we're not necessarily receptive to, but are perhaps disengaged. So how do we harness both ends of those spectra, and how do we go about, I guess, selecting students who are in some way being seen as more representative of the student body by having more specific roles like a cabinet role?
So thank you for asking that. The cabinet, actually the cabinet was selected through they did the selection process. They had to apply to be in the cabinet. They had to state the reason that they wanted to be in the cabinet. A lot of there were some essay questions that they had to answer in regards to what they were hoping to achieve and where that would go. We worked really hard to make it representative. I think we kind of got there. We're halfway there. And the voices that are there, I think people would be surprised. So it is a different group of students than we've heard from before, which we were very happy about. We do believe, so there were 94% of our student body who believe that it's important to engage in discussions and have an active voice. We have been working with the administration through the introduction of advisory into advisory, some of our ideas, both at the middle school and at the high school, to try to elevate those voices. Student-led opportunities for assemblies, student-led opportunities for PD, but we acknowledge that there's a subset of students that we have yet to engage in conversation, and that we know that we need to do that. So I think that's a continuing aspiration for us as we go forward.
Thank you.
Other questions from members of this? Councillor St. Clair.
I just had a quick comment, and I just wanted to applaud you, Dr. Trochik and Dr. Morgan and Ms. Sudak, for implementing this. It seems like it was a really big undertaking over the last year, and I can see how this data would be very applicable on a day-to-day basis. And I guess I just wanted to make a comment and get your reaction. I mean, it seems like the type of tool that only becomes more valuable over time, where you learn from it and see trends and analysis. And do you have any thoughts about kind of how you might approach that, from an analytical point of view?
Oh, we get a lot of ideas. So first of all, it's a very standardized approach at this point in time, right? So the Boston College organization has sort of their roadmap, their playbook, right? And it's built for Anytown USA. Well, we're not always going to be Anytown USA. So I think the bigger conversation, we made a 3-year commitment in our implementation with our partnership with them in terms of their professional development and their support, and utilizing these 3 years to kind of ascertain which aspects of the program are right for Beverly. Where would we see improvement? Where might we utilize, for example, the dashboard that they have is great, but not awesome. And so we think we can make improvements on that, right? And so what would we do for that, and how would we change that? And what data pieces can't we get from that we might need a different data source for? So, it's going to be an iterative process. We did make a 3-year commitment to kind of accessing everything that we can access from this program, and then kind of what aspects of it will we use to make our own, and we've recognized many areas already as we go along to do that.
Who has access to this right now?
In terms of Megan, she's the keeper of all. small. But each City Connects coordinator at the building has all of the data for their building. The building principals have access through the City Connects coordinator for that data. And then we create documents that are then entered into, shared with teachers for individual students. It's not broadly an open network for everyone to access. It's actually really high security at Boston College. We've been working with them to maybe loosen it a little, but we're not getting as far as we would want to be.
Are there thoughts about sharing some kind of findings or report more generally with the public?
Oh yeah, they do a needs assessment, so they did a needs assessment for us in the beginning. We'll get an end of year summary and report that will be shared out to school committee. That will be a more formalized report on the specifics.
And we do get, I just wanted to add to that, we do get, our coordinators have checklists, I have checklists we go through, and then they give us back of how we did on that, what areas we can improve upon. And so that way we can calibrate so we're all in the same place.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Counselor.
Dr. Silva.
A question about the taking the City Connects and morphing it to include some of the information and some of the analytics that you'd like to see. How easy will it be for you to add new data that's not already hard-coded in the system? And how will they work with you to provide the dashboard improvements so that you can utilize it long-term?
Something we're working on, we were looking at, I mean, I will say this, we do take from our other dashboards into consideration when we're doing this, so we utilize Linkit, a lot of that data, but it's us looking at, we're able to extract as much as we can right now. I've been able to extract a lot, and in terms of, how do we add data to it, that's something we're talking about, we're thinking about how do we want it all to map out. So, but it's there, don't worry.
Do you want me to go on? And I would offer that if there are any other questions, you can certainly reach out to me directly. I just don't want to, last year I know I kept you guys really late. I don't want to do that this time. So I thought if I move on, and if you have any other questions, please feel free to email me any questions and we'll be happy to get back to you. The last sort of portion of my presentation tonight is really just an update for you on the budget process. Last year when I came, we had a lot more definitive data. This year we have a new governor. With a new governor is an opportunity for her to present she presented her budget on March 1st as opposed to January. So we are not as far along in the budget process as we are typically at this point in the year. What I'm coming forward with you right now is just some information that I had shared with school committee in our last meeting about the goals that we have. So I want to start off with saying from me that this is a level serviced budget. This is a budget that we took the services that we have in place, and any increases to this in terms of staffing or services right now are directly related to enrollments or student need around certain populations, whether that's special education or English learners. So I'll take you quickly through, again, and I joked earlier, this really is the first slide in almost every presentation that I do. So once again, thinking that, because it's really important, the connection between the district goals and what we try to do in our budget. But I won't read it through. Always important are the factors. This year, the factors that impact the FY24 budget are our contractual obligations. We are in contract with our MTA units, which are teachers, paras, and administrators. We are entering into negotiations with our AFSCME units, which are transportation, food service, and clerical. But we have a pretty good sense of where our contractual obligations will be in terms of that. We always look at enrollment if areas are rising or falling. Our resourcing for high-quality curriculum materials, I will say that these are largely supported by our grants. We have procured, actually, in our FNF meeting tonight, we brought forward a couple of grants that we got for supporting the implementation of our high-quality curriculum materials. We look at department funding requests, and then this year, special education increases, and I do have a few slides that I do want to share with you on that, just to kind of catch you up to date. So this is our budget worksheet, the budget worksheet. This is sort of, we're still in the worksheet phase. None of these are actual proposals, but these are what we've identified in terms of a level service budget. So we're looking at a 0.5 FTE, 0.57 FTE increase in elementary. That's actually in particular a nurse for our AIM program. At middle school, because of our enrollment in our ATTAIN program and the number of English learners, we are requesting 2 teachers, 1 special ed, 1 English learner. High school, again, an increase in our EL population requires an additional paraprofessional to support that program. Within special education, we're looking to add a BCBA and a speech therapist. That's to support our AIM programs and our ATTAIN programs, students with special needs. And this OSD 14% increase, I will go back to that one. That's a big number, you'll notice. I have a couple slides on that in a minute. We know that some bus leases roll off and some new bus leases roll on, and so our increase in our transportation line is $75,000 to cover our new leases for buses. We are looking for, actually this is not an additional position. The float nurse was covered by a Department of Public Health grant through the pandemic, but we now need to assume that into our appropriated budget. And then finally, at this point, we're looking at $140,000 in terms of our just inflational costs for supplies and some of the things. It also includes an additional $20,000 on rubbish and trucking, which supports our sustainability efforts. So just bumping up, if you remember, we put some in last year, bumping that up a little bit more to support some of the composting that we now have in place, by the way, at the middle school and high school for the kitchens. And then finally, health insurance, this in consult with Brian Ailes, this is what the increased cost for health insurance would be for us. And then finally, we had a 2-year plan, if you remember, for rolling in our Director of Opportunity, Access and Equity and our Director of English Learners. So this is just moving off of ESSER and into the appropriated budget, the final half of these 2 positions. I told you that I would go back to OSD tuition rates. So the Operational Services Division is responsible, they're a division out of DOR, they're responsible for setting tuition prices for more than 200 approved special education programs and approximately 100 private schools. The price setting is necessary. We were told the price setting is necessary to accommodate students with needs that cannot be met by their current school district. So we do have students in out-of-district placements, and some of them are in public out-of-district and some of them are in private, and I'll break that down for you in a minute. OSD also sets the price for services not included in the tuition, such as one-to-one aids or any other things that would be involved. So OSD, which is the rate setting regulatory committee, I guess is the best way to say it. Did I say that right, Mayor? I'm aiming at that, saying that correctly. Yep. Has determined that they have authorized an increase in special education private schools tuition for FY24 at 14%. So this is up from 2.5% in FY22, and the average increase since 2011 has been 1.8%. So a 14% increase is an extraordinary increase, and I would say an unexpected cost that we were not anticipating. The additional funding was requested and as it was approved and was based upon the need, based upon inflation on the cost of living and to counter staffing shortages at the private schools. So that was the reason that was given for the increases. We currently have 40 to 45 students across 25 private school placements. The 14% increase for Beverly is estimated at $775,000. Again, that was an unexpected increase in cost. And it does not include the tuition at increase in tuition at our collaboratives, which this year came in at 5%. Or the costs that are associated with any new unanticipated placements. I think we have Bethany has a pretty good handle on who we have. We know we might have a couple more placements, but we have a pretty good handle on who may or may not be needing the services. So we feel pretty comfortable at the 775 number. Well, we don't really feel comfortable at the 775 number, but that's the number. We're comfortable that's the number. Our contractual obligations, which we know of, are this is our 3rd year of our collective bargaining agreement with our unions at 2 3/4%. Our COLA is $1,448,120. Our steps, which are part of our collective bargaining agreement, are $683,989. And our lanes, which for those of you who don't know what the lanes are, they're how within the teacher's contract, as teachers acquire more credits in advanced education, they move across lanes. And so that number is $250,000. And again, the healthcare cost is there that I talked about earlier. So our contractual obligations prior to any of the things that were on the worksheet that I just showed you are $2,422,109. Our appropriated budget, where we sit right now, our last year's budget, the city contribution was $56,185,493. Our Chapter 70 allotment was $13,158,441 for a total budget last year of $69,343,934. As I said, we're still in the budget process. We have not finalized any city contribution number yet, but we do know that our funding increase at this level serviced proposal that I have right here is $2,124,336. We did get an increase in our Chapter 70 funding. Our Chapter 70 funding in the governor's budget has not made it all the way through the process, so this is not final until it does. It's $14,544,481. With the draft budget, our draft budget worksheet right now sits at $72,854,310. Before I go any further, I will say I can give some positive information to you all. We have been working hard. The mayor's groups, the MMA or whatever, is that what it's called? MMA?
Mass mayors.
Mass mayors, as well as the Massachusetts Association of School Superintendents have been working really hard on legislative advocacy. In the first round, the governor's supplemental had listed $20 million for relief for the OSD 14%. The legislative proposal right now sits about $70 million, which is really encouraging that there'll be an opportunity. So we have been advocating, because this increase is really primarily, well, it's not all of it, but some of it is a one-time, because remember, circuit breaker kicks in eventually, right? So this really is a one-year problem at this large amount. Doesn't mean that it doesn't have a continuation of a problem for the small amount that we have to cover, but circuit breaker will come in and give us relief. If circuit breaker doesn't change right now, it would mean that we would get 75% relief for anything over the foundation number, which is somewhere around 49,000. So anything over that, we would get 75%. We're also advocating with the legislature for increasing that 75% reimbursement to 90% in order to cover some of these additional costs that have been really increasing since pre-pandemic times. So those things are in the works. That's one of the reasons why we're kind of on hold. We need to find out what's going to happen. Will there be relief, and how will that relief come in, and what not? There's a discussion that some cities will get a lot of relief and others may not get any, and we don't know what that formula for dispersing those funds will be at this point in time. So we're kind of right now just sort of waiting a little bit until we hear more about how that's going to come in. So I was really just sharing this with you. So again, here's where we are in determining the Chapter 70 funds. We know the governor's budget proposal on March 1st had us at $14,544,481, and we will be waiting for House Ways and Means in the Senate before we know what our final Chapter 70 allotment is. Our next steps is to continue to review our funding sources, looking at one-time expenses, including that portion of OSD increase, additional retirement savings. We kind of know right now how many retirements we have, but a couple more may come in, and so we want to make sure we know what that is. By retirement savings, that means that one of the teachers may retire who's at a higher level, and when we replace that teacher, we may not necessarily be replacing them at that higher value. And we'll continue to monitor enrollments, which are really volatile a little right now. We have some of our elementaries are having a lot of families enroll, particularly we have a number of families who come, Brazil's schools close in February, and we have an influx often of families that come in after that because their school year ended and now they're moving on. So on April 12th, we'll be presenting to the committee, it's actually a regular school committee, not committee of the whole, but we'll be presenting our revised budget numbers then. So that is the budget information that I have for you, and I'd entertain any question.
Well, I think we had agreed that maybe since there were so many unknowns, we would reserve some questions for the April meeting and encourage people to submit their questions that you may be able to answer at that meeting.
Whatever.
That's all right?
Fine with me.
Okay.
I think, Mr. Mayor, you had your hand up?
Yeah, not a question. If I could, just an added little bit of information on that. Hoped for help through the pending state supplemental budget, that hoped for help with the 14% tuition increase. Whether it's 70 or 75 million, we were warned this morning that there's some language in there that could suggest some winners and some losers.
Yes, that's what I was
districts that will get money and districts that won't.
Yeah.
And so there really needs to be a push on our legislators to take that language out and just say, you know, every district is dealing with this increase. Every district should get, you know, based on whatever the right formula is. But I'll give you one of the examples. I forget one of them, but one is if special ed is above a certain threshold, percentage of your overall budget, you'll get help. If it's under that, you won't. Right. So, you know, and we don't even know how we
Which isn't really helpful, because that encourages out-of-district placements and it discourages.
Counterintuitive.
Right, it doesn't make any sense. I will say we've mailed our letters off to our legislators, so asking them to look at that language specifically and understand that, you know, so we just don't know yet. It's kind of a big unknown, but I'm hoping for relief, and we'll see.
Thank you so much, and thank you for preparing all of those slides, for your time, your attention to detail, and we'll look forward to Donna's email with the slide decks that include links so we can dig in further. Appreciate everyone. I'm looking for the school committee for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Bisnick. Is there a second? Thank you, Ms. Coelho. All those in favor? 7-0. The school committee is adjourned.
Is there a motion for the city council to adjourn?
So moved. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. That's 8-0, and we also are adjourned.